Bohan, Dave, sorry, Pecklack, looks like, or something close to that, and John Burbick. Hope I didn't do that too badly. I blame the handwriting. He's smiling. And again, you don't need to go into extended detail today because you will be having substantial data. And just go ahead in any order you wish, but be sure to put your name, state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Johnson, Chair Barker, members of the committee. I'm here to represent New Approach Oregon today, and thank you very much for considering House Bill 3371. House Bill 3371 provides the legislature an excellent opportunity to regulate marijuana, similar to how the state regulates alcohol today. Currently, prohibition costs too much money and doesn't allow for sensible and strong regulations, unlike alcohol. Under House Bill 3371, the Oregon Liquor Control Commission will be able to license and regulate retail establishments that will check IDs and bring marijuana out from the underground into licensed and taxed markets. House Bill 3371 will generate millions of dollars for the state of Oregon, will create jobs, and will divert that money to help fund education, public safety, and substance abuse and mental health programs, as well as provide more money for the general fund. We hope that the legislature will take this bill seriously, and will either pass this bill this session or refer it to the voters, because marijuana legalization is coming to Oregon rather sooner than later, and it makes sense for Oregon to regulate marijuana like alcohol and really take the lead on this issue and make sure there are sensible and strong regulations in place. I'm open for any questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Chief Barker, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. My name is David Kopelak. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Schwabe, Williamson & Wyatt in Portland, Oregon. I graduated from the Oregon School of Law in 1994, and I've been with Schwabe ever since. I'm here today because I and my colleagues at my firm played a significant role in preparing the initial draft of House Bill 3371 in collaboration with New Approach Oregon and Legislative Council. In November 2012, after the passage of Washington's Initiative 502 and Colorado's Constitutional Amendment 64, our client asked us to draft a smart and well thought out bill that could be supported by Oregon legislators and voters across the political spectrum of Oregon. In drafting the bill, we solicited and received input from a wide variety of participants. This happened very quickly, but we did our best to get to where we are today. We solicited input from former prosecutors and law enforcement personnel, from research consultants, business entrepreneurs, activists, and others with significant political and legal experience in Oregon and nationally. Our client's goal in presenting House Bill 3371 to the legislature was to broaden the spectrum of participants in creating this bill. New Approach Oregon wants your input and leadership. We want to share our knowledge, our ideas, our drafting philosophies with you. We want to answer your questions, and of course we want to listen to your suggestions. We also want to address the concerns of those who currently oppose the bill. In fact, we completely expect those who oppose the bill to raise valid issues, concerns, and problems that will help us improve the bill. The New Approach Oregon Coalition has been upfront with my firm from the beginning. Their goal is for the state of Oregon to take the lead in this area by passing the smartest and safest cannabis bill in the nation. The window of time in which the legislature can act and play a forward-looking role is, I believe, short. If current trends continue, and if the legislature fails to act in the near term, Oregon may well find itself with a law or a constitutional amendment through the initiative process that none of us wants. As an attorney, I read business contracts and statutes and regulations every day, and I know the challenges of dealing with poor drafting. The time to participate, I think, is to get in front of this issue is now. Otherwise, I think we might find ourselves in a position where we're reacting to bad legislation, we're playing catch up, we're playing fix it for potentially years to come. I think this is a very rare opportunity. I don't think I've seen anything like this in my professional career, and the Oregon legislature can and should take the lead here, and that's what New Approach Oregon wants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Barker and members of the Judiciary Committee. My name is John Horvick. I'm a Senior Associate at DHM Research. Many of you may know DHM for more than 30 years of public opinion research here in Oregon. We've conducted thousands of studies to measure Oregonians' attitudes and values in all manners of public policy, from healthcare to education to public safety. Important for this discussion, we are also leading experts in the state regarding voter attitudes. And I come to you today with research we have conducted about Oregon voters' support for marijuana legalization. Attitudes towards marijuana legalization are changing quickly. Nationally, researchers from Gallup have been asking Americans whether they support legalization since 1970. And in that year, just 12% favored legalization. Over the next decade, support increased to 28% and then held relatively constant for several years. In the late 1990s, though, public attitudes started to change, with more and more people rethinking their opposition. By 2003, 34% supported legalization. In 2009, it had increased to 44%, and in 2011, it crossed the 50% mark. 2012 proved to be a pivotal year for marijuana legalization, with citizen initiatives reaching the ballot in Colorado, Washington, and here in Oregon. Although Measure 80 did not pass in Oregon, it surprised many observers that it achieved 47% support, despite the fact that there's very little campaign spending or voter outreach. There were well-funded and organized campaigns in Washington and Colorado, and as you know, those states approved legalization with 56% and 55% of the vote, respectively. Considering that the demographic and political makeup of Oregon is similar to Colorado and Washington, if Measure 80 had enjoyed comparable levels of spending as the campaigns in those states, it's quite possible that it would have passed here too. As evidence of that, it's worth noting that in September 2011, polling in Washington showed that support for legalization was 46%. Last week, DHM Research conducted a survey for New Approach Oregon of 2014 likely voters, measuring where they now stand on marijuana legalization and what they believe is the best way for Oregon to decide the issue. We found that support for marijuana legalization continues to increase, with now 50% saying they support legalization. It's noteworthy this is 3 percentage points higher than what Measure 80 achieved in a general election with a voter profile that was younger than we sampled in our recent poll. Perhaps the most significant finding in our survey is that voters overwhelmingly believe that marijuana legalization in Oregon is inevitable. We asked voters which of the following two statements was closest to their opinion. Statement A, the way things are going, I'm confident that sooner or later marijuana will be legal in Oregon. Or statement B, I seriously doubt that marijuana will ever be legal in Oregon. 81% chose statement A, that they are confident that marijuana will be legal in Oregon. As a public opinion researcher, this result stands out, and I believe sends a signal to where the voters' attitudes are heading. Now that marijuana is legal in Colorado and Washington, Oregon voters overwhelmingly believe it will happen here too. And once you have crossed that point in their minds, the discussion changes from whether to legalize marijuana to what is the most responsible way forward. To help answer that question, in our survey we asked voters what is the best way for Oregon to consider marijuana legalization. We found that just a third of voters would prefer that advocates draft an initiative and collect signatures to place on the ballot. A majority of voters would rather that you, the Oregon legislature, take the lead and either pass a bill for the governor's signature or refer a measure for voters to consider. Voters understand that legalizing, regulating, and taxing marijuana is complicated, and they're looking to their elected representatives to thoughtfully consider a new approach for Oregon. Just to reiterate a few points, marijuana legalization is a quickly evolving issue. Over the last several decades, we have gone from almost no support to today where voters in 2 states have approved it, and it has reached the 50% threshold here in Oregon. And although Measure 80 failed by a narrow margin last fall, today more than 8 in 10 voters believe that it is only a matter of time before marijuana is legal in Oregon, and they're looking for the legislature to take the lead.
Thank you. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. David, I'm just curious your perspective. How is this I mean, I just don't know how this is all going to pan out with where the feds are at right now. I mean, none of us like to see state by state by state do this patchwork like what we're seeing right now in Colorado and Washington. And having talked to some friends in both those states, they're struggling something fierce with those two initiatives right now to get any groundwork going. What's your thoughts on how this is going to flush out with the feds on this, the federal government on this whole thing?
Well, I'm no constitutional attorney, but I believe what the feds do and the announcement that Eric Holder has said is coming soon will obviously be very important. I mean, if the feds file an injunction against the states of Washington and Colorado to prevent the implementation of this regulatory mechanism, I don't know if anything can happen. I don't know how that would play out. But I think anything short of that, I mean, if there's a green light or a yellow light, and the feds say, well, we're going to let the states experiment, or we might put some parameters around it. We want to make sure that there's no importation or exportation or leakage or anything else. I mean, they have their concerns. But I think if they give a yellow light or a green light, I think it will just speed things up. I mean, I think the various states will just see that as an opportunity. Okay, we have the blessing. We can be assured that nothing terrible is going to happen. Let's try to experiment. And I think that's likely. But I don't have a crystal ball, and none of us do. But in the meantime, I think our thought is that we just prepare. We go forward as if that the worst is not going to happen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, panel. Sheriff Myers, I'll remind the audience that we have these hearings with respect, and if you hear somebody speaking you disagree with, I don't want moans and groans and all that. Everybody's entitled to have their chance to testify.
Chair Barker, members of the committee, my name is Pat Carrot, I'm the Sheriff of Washington County. I've been certified in Oregon to be a police officer for 24 years, a corrections officer for 7 years. I have an executive certificate with the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, a master's degree in public administration from Portland State University, and I'm here today to represent the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, or OSSA. That organization strongly opposes House Bill 3371. I will summarize my main points to support our opposition. First, passing this legislation now will prevent Oregon from taking advantage of important and potentially costly lessons from the states of Washington and Colorado. For example, will Attorney General Holder file suit to block states from legalizing marijuana? Also, it is common that federal grants to state and local agencies require compliance with federal drug laws. Would Oregon's failure to comply with federal law jeopardize those grants if this House bill is passed? Important public safety and community health services are funded by these federal programs like Safe School Grants, Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grants, Homeless Addiction Treatment Grants, Community Mental Health Block Grants, and our specialty courts around our state, like Drug Court and Mental Health Court, are funded, actually are operational only because these grants are in place. Section 4 of the Act, as you know, allows for home growing and some home production, possession of marijuana-infused products. For many who are growing now, will be only too happy to continue, as this Act will simply give them legal authority to grow and the opportunity to supply their friends in addition to themselves, given the alternative to purchase at an OLCC store for an inflated price, on camera, and in violation of federal law. Section 39 of the Act clearly assigns local police officers, deputies, and prosecutors to enforce the provisions of this Act. Yet it is very concerning the Act fails to assign any resources anticipated from the Act to those law enforcement agencies. We know too well there are counties and police agencies in this state at the county and city level that are underfunded to the point of not being able to provide 24-hour police coverage. Moreover, if today local law enforcement investigators investigate a black market marijuana cultivation or distribution enterprise, it leads to forfeiture of property or proceeds from the criminal conduct. The proceeds from forfeiture goes to the local investigating agency to help fund other investigations and to help pay for the investigation's high cost in staff and equipment. Section 40 appears to disallow that option for provisions of this act and instead require such proceeds go to the school fund. Though a worthy recipient, a realistic marijuana legalization system includes resource allocation that best ensures credible enforcement of its own provisions by those charged with its enforcement. This act fails on that front, and proceeds from criminal violations related to this act should be treated in the manner current state forfeiture laws provide today. This act has the effect of an unfunded mandate. The cost will be borne by local law enforcement while the state receives some revenue benefits. The act fails to provide clear standards for driving impaired for marijuana use. Today, such investigations require specially trained police that have credentials to conduct drug-impaired driving investigations. Such investigations usually add several hours to a conventional drunk driving investigation, making marijuana-related intoxicated driving or crash investigations very costly. And they take police off the street for lengthy periods of time. In my office, I have about 180 patrol deputies that serve Washington County, and I have 6 drug recognition experts. So in almost every case, we're calling someone in off duty on overtime. In Oregon, this is no small problem. According to figures from the state's drug recognition expert coordinator, total impaired driving arrests that involve cannabis have increased by 40% from 2008 to 2011. That's just the last year that we have those statistics. And it is on a steady increase. This act will not make the problems associated with marijuana use go away. Specifically, those problems include marijuana abuse, dependency, impaired driving, and costly investigations of impaired driving and related traffic crashes. Much of the marijuana black market and use by kids, which lowers academic achievement in our schools. In some cases, this act will make those problems worse. This act is an effective unfunded mandate on county and city law enforcement agencies and district attorneys. Some may believe this act will provide a steady and significant stream of income to schools, the state police, and drug programs. I think that is unlikely if the act allows home growers possession of 6 plants, a pound and a half of dried marijuana, and the ability to cook or brew their own supply of pot brownies, cookies, and other marijuana-infused products at home. Indeed, the media reported last week that the state of Washington is significantly lowering the revenue expected from marijuana sales in that state. Social costs, which we know from our experience with tobacco and alcohol, will simply outpace tax revenue. A specific recommendation I would make is to look at the Washington initiative. They established a THC blood level of 5 nanograms to be kind of prima facie evidence for a violation, much like 0.08 is the alcohol standard across this country. That would help immensely on the investigative resources required to keep our roads safe. That concludes my testimony. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for your service, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sheriff, for your testimony. So you mentioned impaired driving and that using marijuana could increase 40%. What proportion of impaired driving that you would be aware of is due to other drugs as opposed to marijuana?
You know, I can tell you just from the table I'm looking at from the drug recognition expert coordinator. Of the total evaluations, this is kind of going to get to your answer, but not exactly, and I apologize. I'm happy to provide a specific answer later. Total drug evaluations for 2011 was 1,600, and of that, cannabis was found to be present in 778 cases, so just under half of all of the drug recognition expert evaluations. You know, just anecdotally, I would say probably 1 in 10. 1, maybe 2 in 10 currently of our DUI arrests end up involving a drug recognition expert analysis of some sort.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sheriff. I apologize, I said Myers, Sergeant Sheriff Myers.
That's quite all right. He's a lot more handsome than I am.
Yeah, but you're my sheriff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Committee, as we mentioned before, the -1s, I just want to say what we're trying to accomplish here is some things we spoke about. Trying to craft responsible marijuana regulation, and not having somebody draft a poorly written initiative that we'd have to spend the next several years trying to fix. We have to recognize that if we have something that's taxed too high, it's simply not going to work. The black market will stay where it is or take over. He was mentioning about what will happen if we allow homegrown and so on. We want to regulate it so that it stays away from our kids. We don't want young people exposed in high school. We want to be sure that our workers are safe and the people around them are safe. We don't want stoned people at work, just like we don't want drunk people at work. And this is a chance to draft a bill that will make sense and it will be acceptable to the public. And we will watch closely Washington and Colorado and see how they're progressing. And as they mentioned, the tide is kind of changing this question. Those of us who grew up watching Reefer Madness are getting old and dying off, so that movie's kind of lost its potential punch. So
you were 70 yesterday.
So move to a work session on House Bill 3371.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the -1 amendment to House Bill 3371.
Representative Krieger moves the -1 amendments in House Bill 3371. Is there discussion? Is there objection? Hearing none, so ordered.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move House Bill 3371 as amended to the floor for due pass with a subsequent referral to
Representative Krieger moves House Bill 3371 as amended for the due pass for subsequent referral to revenue.
Mr. Chair, it's my understanding then that revenue is going to be the structure and the path for policy regarding this whole thing. Okay, well, I'm going to be no. And the reason behind that is all you have to do is Google right now and go over to the British Medical Journal and study and read what they've done over the last several years with their issues out there. First thing is that they identify that marijuana in itself increases the risk of psychosis. I don't want that here in this country, even though, I mean, they also identified that teen marijuana usage may cause damage to the brain for life. That's another issue, but that's a study that they've done. There's another issue that the British Medical Journal did a report on a couple of years ago, which I found very fascinating, and it's a healthcare issue, that one marijuana cigarette equates to 1 pack of tobacco cigarettes on the impact on your lungs. And I'm thinking, well, that's the first time I'd ever heard that. But that was there. And then also, there was another study that identifies that it permanently lowers the IQ. That's what their studies are, and all you have to do is Google that to find that stuff. I am strongly in favor of the medical side of needing to use marijuana for the state, as what the voters have done back in 1998. I am not in favor of following the same path of what Colorado and Washington have done in a recreational usage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two things. First of all, I should declare conflict. My wife works at a communication firm, Guard Communications, and I believe represents at least some proponents of this measure, I believe. Number two, having said that, moving on to the bill, it's just actually a procedural thing. I just wonder if we are simply going to have a superficial hearing, move it over to revenue where it can be worked. I'm happy to go with that. I haven't even read the 40-page amendment we just adopted. But in the event we're doing that, I think it might be appropriate respectfully to submit it there without recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to withdraw the motion regarding setting the floor for due pass and change that motion without recommendation. One other comment is, even though we're sending it down there, that committee's makeup is not as qualified to deal with that as this committee is. And why that's taking place should have been a discussion with the co-chairs from leadership before all of a sudden today, well, there it is.
Thank you.
Indeed, Mr. Chair, there are some very needed questions wrapped up in this. There's the Gonzalez versus Wright case, which is medical marijuana, but nevertheless it addresses federal attention to state marijuana laws and the like. And my thought regarding the Dash 1 amendments of this bill is that it is going to be less palatable to the federal approach and potential other ideas that will be floating around out there. And so even I'm not ready to advance the discussion to another committee before some of these issues have been resolved. So yeah.
We have a motion, call the roll, please.
Representative Barton.
Aye.
Representative Cameron.
No.
Representative Hicks.
No.
Representative Olson.
No.
Representative Tomei. Aye. Representative Williamson. Aye. Vice Chair Garrett.
Aye.
Vice Chair Krieger.
Aye.
Chair Barker.
Aye. Motion carries. Bill moves through. Thank you.
Thank you for calling me.
You want to say anything before I turn it off, Glenn?
Yes, good night.
Good night. God bless you all, every single one of you.